All right, what's up? I saw this video last night, and I watched this video on stream last night, and I kind of had a visceral reaction to it because, as I watched it, I was very upset with how lazy this review was. I don't think this review is a fair review of the Azeron Cyborg or like any of the Azeron products as a whole. If you see down here, on my thing, you see underneath it, underneath my keyboard camera, it says Azeron. I put that there. I am not sponsored by Azeron, but I do have an Azeron coupon code for like 5% off or whatever. But that code is more for telling people that I sent people their way because I bought an Azeron myself, and I was very interested in the Azeron, but it took me like 2 to 3 months to even decide to actually buy the Azeron. So when I bought the Azeron, I it took me about 2 days to get used to using it. And then from then on, I was kind of like tweaking little things here and there, tweaking button position or whatever, and changing things around. And I've come up with a way to, set my buttons for whatever game I'm gonna play, and and be comfortable with it, right? So I think I've had my Azeron for maybe about 3 months, maybe 2 to 3 months. I don't remember exactly when I got it, but I've had it for at least 2 months, 3 months tops, right? So I'm watching this review, and I was very interested in the review because I was like, oh, Linus has a Azeron video. Let me see what he thinks about the Azeron. And I was very disappointed. Not because it was a mostly negative review, but because a lot of the information is either uh wrong or like misinformed, and like uh and it doesn't feel like the person who reviewed this actually cared enough to really take the time to understand the Azeron, right? Like to understand use cases and like ways to use it and ways to set it up, and the understanding that yeah, it takes some time to set up and what it is for people, because he was never a person that really wanted to get into it. Linus is the one that thought it was interesting and thought that, oh, I want to see, how this would be, how using it for a while would be. But since he's a very busy man and he has and he runs this company, he might not have the time to sit down and learn how to use this Azeron. He doesn't have the time, right? So he has somebody else do it for him. And he said that no one else in the company wanted um to do it, instead except for this one guy who decided. He was like, yeah, I guess it looks interesting, it looks pretty cool. And then he had it for 2 months and wasn't able to solve the very simple problems that he was having. And then Linus reports on it from what the guy tells him. Eh, let's just get into the video because I'm just trying to basically give you context for why I'm like upset with this video.
You can reach what? 20, maybe 23 keys on your gaming keyboard? Garbage. Get a load of this.
He starts out very, hype and positive about it, and like he's gonna, like it's gonna be like, oh yeah, this is a really cool thing, this is what you can do with it, these are the different use cases for, like, that's what I'm thinking he's gonna go into, like all the different things that you can use it for and how you can use it and how it's comfortable and how you have to, maybe get used to it a little bit. But
the
it gets
Azeron
worse.
Cyborg puts over 100 key bindings and macros at your literal fingertips.
He doesn't explain this at all. He doesn't explain how it's possible for you to have 100 plus keybinds on your Azeron. He just shows you a thing with a bunch of buttons on it, and he's like, yeah, 100 plus keybinds. And you're looking at it and you're like, there's not 100 keys on there. I can fit all of my fingers on there. How is it 100 keys? Because you can use layering. You can use layering, but in order to get 100 keys, you would have to have multiple layering buttons that switch to different layers so that you can have more keys, more access to more keys, but you can't even really reach all of the keys unless your layering buttons are set up in certain ways. And if you set your layering buttons up in certain ways, it's not comfortable to reach all the buttons. I literally use layering to do one thing sometimes, and it's like I'll hold the layering button to switch to a different profile, to press another button, and then release the layering button to go back to the profile that I've been using. That is what it's for. So if you have like all of your keybinds set up and then you have a layering button, you can press the layering button, switch to an alternate profile to have where you have like, I don't know, alternate things like in Cyberpunk, right? I was using the layering button. So when it was for like driving, because like jump and crouch, I wanted it to be gas and brake. But when you're walking, you know, I wanted my jump and crouch to be gas and brake, but I didn't realize you can set the buttons on a second like function. So I did it in the Azeron instead. And I would have a layering button. When I get in a car, I would hold the layering button, which is technically like my clutch, right? Hold the layering button and then use my jump button and my crouch button for gas and brake. When I get out of the car and I'm not holding the layering button down, it's now jump and crouch, right? You know, it's like that's what I used it for. In Super People, I use the layering button so that I can they have crafting. So like you can use the crafting thing. You can alt 1, alt 2, whatever for crafting. And so in Super People, I have a layering button so that when I press my layering button, it switches to an alternate profile, and then I can press my crafting button to craft, you know, craft up my gun or my armor or whatever that's in that crafting slot, right? Or I press my layering button and then press the button that is usually my interact button to eat a super pill or whatever, or a candy bar or whatever in Super People, right? So like it's just a way to have your profile switch for a temporary like a temporary amount of time, just to press an extra button or two or something like that, and then switch back by releasing the layering button. That's what your layering is for. You don't have to use like 100 fucking keybinds, or you don't have to map everything and have like if you want to do that, you could do that, sure, but like you don't need 4, 5, 6 layering buttons. Like I don't know what game you playing, whatever.
With up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 functions per finger, you are gonna need a bigger action bar. Still not enough for you? How about unlimited custom profiles?
It's not, you don't need a bigger action bar. You need, it makes it so that you can have everything on your action bar within reach. That's what it's for.
Endlessly adjustable switch positions, and whatever color scheme you want. Yeah. When I saw this thing, I knew I had to try it.
I knew I had to try it. This thing looks really cool. That's the same thing I said. I was like, yo, this looks cool. I do want to try it, but it's $170. Do I really want to try it for $170? I'm not sure. Took me 3 months to decide to get it for $170.
Or rather, pay someone else to try it for me, because
pay someone else to try it for me. Now, this could mean that, you know, he just got one of his, you know, employees to just take it home and try it out. He already pays them because they work there. Or he could have paid him and be like, okay, I'll give you a bonus. I'll give you some extra money to take this home and try it out for a month. And, you know, I'll compensate you for your time for using this thing at home. Wrong idea. You shouldn't do that, because this person probably was like, oh yeah, sure. I could use the extra money, right? I could use the extra money. I don't like the thing in the first place. I don't really want to use it. But if you're paying me extra, yeah, sure, why not? Well, I'll play some video games with it for a month. Sure. Like, why not? Right? Didn't want to use it in the first place, gets paid to use the thing that he didn't really want to use in the first place, gives a half-ass report on it.
Because as good as it sounds in theory to have 29 programmable buttons within mere millimeters of my fingertips, it can take weeks or even months to overcome this.
False. This is not, no, never. Maybe for some people it might take weeks. When I first got the Azeron, right, I was like, oh, maybe it might take me around, 2 weeks to get used to using this. It took me 2 days. It took me 2 days because I had to find out where I wanted my buttons, my movement buttons to be, like my mainstay buttons. Like, you know how in video games on your keyboard where your shift is usually sprint in every game, it's usually by default, your shift is usually set to like sprint or walk, right? Your control is usually set to like crouch, or maybe your C button is usually set to crouch by default in games that are on PC. Your WASD is how you move in every game, right? They don't usually make it anything else except WASD. You can change it, but that's what they set it to by default. Your Q and your E are usually set to something like an ability by default, right? Your fire button and your ADS button is usually set to your mouse left and right click by default in video games, right? So if you find out where you want your keys by default to be on the Azeron for all of your games, your default keys will always stay the same, right? Your default keys will always stay the same. Let's take a quick look. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to pull this up on the screen, right? Let's pull up my screen. Pull up the Azeron software right here, right? So the first game that I ever made a setting for was Valorant. I didn't label them. I just have the keys here because I really didn't feel like labeling them, and I never just did that. But I labeled like everything else, most other keys on the thing on all my other games, right? So for Valorant, right, I had moved my buttons around on Valorant quite a bit, right? My control used to be here, my space was here, and my shift for walk was here at one point, right? So I really didn't like the way that felt, and I was like, that doesn't really make sense for a lot more games. So I wanted something that was more default, something that I could have that was like default in all games. So I started using my shift here because I was like, well, shift is usually on my pinky anyway, right? Shift is usually on my pinky on my shift button. So run and walk is usually on my or shift button, like depending on what you're doing, how you have it set in Valorant. You can have it as a run or you can have it as a sprint. You can have walk by default, whatever. You get what I'm saying. Shift here on pinky, that's where I use my shift button. So then I was like, space I had here at one point where I was using this to jump. And I was like, that's fine, that's cool, but I moved my jump button to my pointer finger because I was like, I use jump a lot and it's jumped in a lot of games. There's always a point. I think I could put jump here. That'd be fine. And then I think I had control here for crouch, but like sometimes I don't want my crouch here because I want something else here. Like if I have a melee button or if I have something else, so I moved it here. So space, control, and shift are in the same thing for every game that I play. For Fortnite, space, control, shift. For Shatterline, space, control, shift. Cyberpunk 22, space, not control, but crouch, because control is my crouch. So, like, I don't think of the button being C, or I don't think of the button being a Q or a shift button. Like, I don't want to remember the buttons that I put there. I just remember the functions. I remember where I put the functions. So here, space is not control, but it's C. It's still crouch. And sprint is not, it's not shift here, but it's still sprint because I wanted to put it on a separate button and still have it be sprint break, right? Because I wanted my my car controls to still be on these three buttons, but I didn't want to change them for what they were in the game. So I figured out how to like kind of set that in the game, and I was like, okay, I'll set it like that in the game, and I only use the Azeron to play. So I never have an issue where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go back to playing on the keyboard and got to switch all my buttons back. I'm never going to play on keyboard unless my Azeron is broken. What? I'm never gonna play on keyboard unless my Azeron is broken, right? And I need to wait for another one to come, or I want to play some games and I don't want to fucking wait, right? So it's same functions. So my functions are in the same place on all of my things that are like shooters. Jump, crouch, sprint. Same thing. Ghost Runner, jump, crouch, sprint. Split gate, jump, crouch, sprint. You get the idea of what I'm saying? And also reload is on the same spot for everything too. Reload, jump, crouch, sprint is usually the same in every single game I play. A menu escape is usually like the escape key is usually here, which is on my D-pad nub, which is to pull back on my D-pad because it makes sense that I pull back on this D-pad nub to go backwards out of menus. That's why I have it there. It's intuitive to me. Like, I don't know if it's intuitive for everybody else, but I pull back to go out of menus. right? Or you pull back to go into the escape menu. But like anytime I'm in menus and I want to go backwards, I pull back on the D-pad nub. Like that's how I have it. And you know, for different games, I have stuff set to other things, but like you have to find what your default keys are going to be for all your games. Back here are my 1 and 2, my primary and secondary, my weapons. I usually have my weapons set to here. So when I want to switch weapons, I don't want to use the scroll wheel. I've been using the scroll wheel to switch weapons in competitive games and in all games all the time. And I wanted to break that habit. So I unbound my scroll wheel as weapon switch because it's better, in my opinion, especially in Fortnite, where you want to press the exact weapon that you want to pull out. So it's like, all right, I want to pull out my shotgun and pull out my SMG. Then I want to press those buttons. So to break that habit, I unbound my scroll wheel for weapon switch and just use my buttons back here. But on Fortnite, back here, I have Q2, 3, 4. Because my harvest tool, you switched from harvest tool to weapon. But then if you press Q again, it switches from your harvest tool back to the gun that you had out. So that's why I use Q instead of 1, right? So then I have slot 2, 3, 4, and then I have 5 and 6 up here. So these are my two utilities for Fortnite. So like usually where you have your heals or like your bombs or your grenades or your boogie bombs or whatever, that's usually where I put those. Down here is where I have my weapons. So like I have my shotgun, or I have my sniper rifle, my shotgun, and my SMG, or sniper rifle, like shotgun AR or something like that. But I usually keep them in a certain spot. And since Fortnite has the thing where it sets them to the types of weapons into the specific slots, usually my slots are all the same. So I get to have the muscle memory of pressing these buttons, and while I'm moving around, I can switch weapons, reach back, switch weapons. Now in Fortnite, I do have my build controls set in here, but I don't play build. But I set it this way so in case I ever wanted to go back to trying to play build, I could do that, right? I could go in and go floor, roof, stairs, wall, and then have my edit key here, right? Edit, floor, roof, stairs, wall, and then like be able to like press these things when I need them, auto run, have utility, trap picker, and I can have buttons here that I never really used before. But I still have reload here. It's a different button than it is in some of my other games, but it's still reload. It doesn't matter what button it is. This is just a reload button. So like there's just so many things that like were not talked about in this review, and how like they're trying to like get people to it's their job to let people know that it's their job to let people know like the I guess the what they're getting into, right? But you gave it to somebody who didn't even want to use it in the first place. That's my
learning curve on a product like this to review it properly. And buttons within mere millimeters of my fingertips, it can take weeks or even months to overcome the steep learning curve on a product like this to review it properly. And I don't want to drop my rank. What I will drop though is this segue to our sponsor,
War Thunder. War Thunder
wanted to daily drive
for signing up.
So at the beginning of this, like we'll just let it play real quick. Let's let it play.
Truthfully, nobody really wanted to daily drive the Cyborg, but
nobody really wanted to daily drive the Cyborg. Nobody wanted to do it. He wanted to see if it was, you know, good or whatever. Or he wanted to try it. That's what it was. He wanted to try it, but nobody in the office wanted to. Nobody in his entire office was like, "Yo, that's a pretty cool looking thing. Let me try that out." So nobody could bury their ego for a month of playing video games and just playing some video games with it. It's not like they had to play every single game with it. They could play some matches with it, like, get an understanding of it, mess with it for a little while, and then like, I don't know, maybe some days, you know, go back to playing on keyboard, whatever. But like, give it a fair shot, like, right? So nobody else wanted to do it. That's fine. You didn't want to get into it. You didn't want to do it. Cool, right?
But Plouffe from the writing team
Plouffe from the writing team decided, you know, it looks pretty cool. I guess I'll give it a shot.
Made the mistake of saying, that looks kind of cool, during our weekly writers meeting. So he was voluntold to take it home, set it up, and
So he said it looks kind of cool. So you guys told him to take it home. He didn't even agree. Like he probably was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And they were like, oh, well, you should go take it home and try it. And he was like, yeah, take it home and try it. Just take it home, try it, play with it for a month, and then give me a report on it.
game on it for a month so that we could give the Power Glove of the future a fair shake.
Not a fair shake. Didn't give it to the right person. Not a fair shake.
Spoiler alert, at the end of what ended up being actually 2 months, I offered it to him for free. For real, you can have it.
No, I don't want it. Nope. You played with it for 2 months and didn't get like good enough with it to go, you know what? Yeah, I'll take it. I might as well. Giving it to you for free. $170 piece of equipment, giving it to you for free. You can have it. Nah, you can keep it. You can literally have took it home, or given it to somebody you know that was interested in it, and you were like, nope, don't want it, nope. Get out of my face. You're like I don't understand.
And he won't take it, which is troubling for Azeron.
It's not troubling for Azeron. This video is troubling for Azeron. This video. Azeron shouldn't be troubled by someone not wanting to use the product, because everybody's not going to want to use the product, right? Everybody's not going to be interested in using the product. But the people that are interested in using the product want to know what it's about. And this video showed millions of people nothing about the Azeron in a good light. Nothing.
But hold on, it's probably not for the reasons you think, and he did find a lot of potential benefits.
He did not find a lot of potential benefits. I guarantee I've had found many more potential benefits for using it than he did. I don't even just use it for gaming. I use it to edit videos. It's a keypad. It's a bunch of hotkeys. I set my hotkeys to my Azeron for DaVinci Resolve, which I still have plenty of room, and using layering. If you were to really get into editing video, like if you're really into editing video and you edit video a lot and you use a lot of different things, the layering feature would be crazy for people who are like video editing. I've been meaning to set it up for like Photoshop and like use it for Photoshop, but I don't use Photoshop enough right now to warrant me like really setting it up and using it for Photoshop. I don't do enough things in Photoshop right now. Like I do use Photoshop a lot in the past, but until I start like making like a lot of thumbnails again, I'll probably do it. I'll probably set it up now because I got to make a thumbnail for this video. But yeah, this video
benefits
we're
if you're willing
only
to
2 minutes in.
unlearn what you have learned. The Cyborg is hardly the first game board on the market. Everyone from Belkin to Razer to Red Dragon has at least dabbled in the space. But the main differentiators are that unlike its competitors, it has no support for WASD movement. It relies instead entirely on the thumbstick. And unlike
the whole point of the Azeron, right, is to get away from WASD movement. That's pretty much the point. Like, I don't want to get another gaming keypad just to use WASD again. The whole point of me getting the Azeron keypad was to get away from the WASD movement and use and free up my 3 fingers and 4 buttons to use my thumb for movement. So instead of using WASD with 3 fingers, I put WASD on the joystick and use my thumb. My thumb is now out of the way, and all the rest of my fingers are free to use every other thing on the keypad that I need to play the game. That's the whole point. When you get these keypads, people don't get another keypad to use WASD again. Like that kind of defeats the purpose of buying the gaming keypad in the first place. Maybe it moves some of the hotkeys closer and you use some of the hotkeys on your thumb. That's how I do for Lost Ark. Since you don't have WSD movement in Lost Ark and you don't need to move around with the keys. Now I use the joystick as a faux button. Like it's like a button. Like instead of pressing in, because I don't press in on the joystick because of the way it does sit on there. I don't like pressing in on the joystick. But I do, like you can, like if you put your hand behind the thing and press in on it, like you can use it for something. I just don't want to press in on the joystick module without holding the back of it. But I press literally like what would be right. What would be right on the joystick, I tap it like a button to press for talking to people. So instead of using like kind of like your interact button, basically, I use that as an interact button. And it's kind of chill. Like it's kind of chill to use, like to just tap down on the joystick to use it as an interact button, because that's all I ever use it for in Lost Ark, right? There's so many different ways to use the Azeron and use the keys and use the joysticks. But like you have to sit down with it. You have to be invested in using this thing. Like you have to be invested in using this.
Like others, it has the ability to mold to your hand, dramatically reducing the distance between your fingers and your wide repertoire of abilities, potions, and spells. Plouffe plays a lot of first and third person shooters, and while he's much more accurate with a mouse than a thumbstick, his left hand does legitimately get tired from holding down forward or back for hours during a lengthy gaming session.
I'm not even gonna say it.
With 3 school-age kids, I can hardly relate with these problems or feel bad for him
you get
at all,
tired
but
from
it can be
W,
a legitimate issue, especially for people with accessibility concerns. To represent FPS games then, he briefly tried Valorant, more on that later, but ended up logging most of his playtime in Dying Light 2. For a third-person shooter, he finished Leon's second run in Resident Evil 2 Remake, then, to make sure that we had a game that benefits from a lot of key bindings, he played a bunch of Dota 2.
Okay. All right. So the three games that he played 2 single-player games, right? 2 single-player games where you're running around and you're basically all you're doing is holding the forward button. Like all you're doing is holding forward most of the time, turning around, looking at stuff, and then you fire, and you're firing with your gun. Resident Evil doesn't really take advantage, if I'm not mistaken, it doesn't really take advantage of having a lot of keybinds on the Azeron. Like, what are you doing most of the time? What are you doing most of the time in Resident Evil? You're walking around, you may hit the interact button to pick something up, hit the interact button to open up a door, and then you're using your mouse to aim and shoot. You're not really using any of the buttons on the Azeron. You're not really using the Azeron. Dying Light, probably similar. Probably a similar thing. Valorant is also a similar thing. I literally use it to play Valorant all the time. Right? And then he makes a statement about Valorant and the Azeron that is completely incorrect. And I'm frustrated. Dota, I play League of Legends with the Azeron. You don't need the Azeron for like League of Legends, but it's pretty cool to play with it because it definitely does make it more comfortable for me to press all the buttons that I need to press, and everything is within reach, and I don't have to worry about where stuff is because I can have my lock and unlock button very close. I can have all my skills in one spot. I can have I can have the 2 buttons I use for my summoner spells. I can have the button that I use for wards. I can have the buttons that have active like your active items. Like you can have buttons that are specifically for your active items. So when they're in those certain spots, you know that these buttons will activate your active items, and you don't have to reach too far to hit these buttons. Like you don't have to reach far. You don't have to really think too hard to reach to these other buttons. Now, people do this on the keyboard, and I'm not saying it's super hard to do on a keyboard, but for some people, it's not that comfortable hitting those buttons. Like in Fortnite, people hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 just by reaching up and pressing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 while they're moving around, jumping, doing whatever they do on keyboard. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I much rather do it on the Azeron. Like, I've never liked it. I just never do it. That's why I used to use my scroll wheel to change weapons, because I hated trying to fight people and pressing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Like I just, because I have to move my fingers up and change them around and do all this finger dancing on the keyboard to be able to move around how I want to while switching weapons and building. Like, too much finger dancing for me. I just wasn't good at it. So like the Azeron makes that easier for me.
First, of course, though, he had to set it up. I mean, it's not ergonomic if it doesn't fit in your hand, right? They ship it with this little hex key and actually really nice feeling aluminum driver handle that unfortunately uses this non-standard freaking bit, so you can't use anything else in it and can't use it for anything else. Kind of a bummer. You know what can be used for anything though? The LTT screwdriver from lttstore.com.
Whatever, bro.
We've got a lot of adjustments here. You got your length, you got your spread, got your angles here. Okay, so is that, yeah, that's locked. Lots of adjustment on the thumb here. You can have it here, 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 depending on the length of your thumb. Even the thumb arm has like a second hole, so it can be out farther than this adjustment range. Okay, this thumb one is a little funky. Very 3D printed in terms of build quality. I don't mean that as like an insult, it just is. Oh my God,
Because,
I can
it's a
see
3D
why this
printed
took you
product.
so long to configure.
This is why I didn't get the original one, but the original one I think
Now that
looked
it's
more
dialed
3D
in, it's
printed
actually
than
like
the
pretty darn comfortable. This feels good.
the
But
Cyborg.
one thing to note
why I
is
got
that
the
they actually
Cyborg.
have a compact version that instead of having these scorpion tail style switches for the fingernails, actually has a button on the tops of these towers. And
I think this is the one thing in the entire video that I fully agree with, is that if I had a second choice, I would have gotten the Cyborg Compact instead of this Cyborg, because I've not been able to comfortably press all 4 of these scorpion tail buttons. I'm going to call them that from now on because I like that term. These scorpion tail buttons, I have not really been able to press them comfortably, so I don't really use them that often. I use like the one on my pointer finger for some stuff sometimes, but I rarely set them to anything because they're not that comfortable, and I would much rather be able to just reach up and press the buttons on the Compact. I think the Compact is probably better if you were to get one. The Compact. Yeah. Because like the way that they are set up, like I can't reach up with my pinky on the last scorpion tail button. It's annoying. I have it up and I just have to reach up with my pinky and press the button. I guess that's how I'm supposed to use it.
think that
But it's not really comfortable to do it that way. So I rarely use them. All the other buttons are great. All the other buttons are fine. It's just the scorpion tail buttons. The last 2 on my ring finger and my pinky are the most uncomfortable ones to press, so I don't use them. The first 2 are fine. Like it seems like they were trying to be knuckle buttons, but I think maybe if they were longer, like if the scorpion tails were longer, at least on the first 2 buttons, that I would be able to use them and like, I don't know, maybe use my knuckles to bump those buttons, maybe. But it's just not comfortable, so I barely use them ever. I usually just reach up and press them with my finger, like if I am using them.
that Plouffe and I are on the same page when I say that we would probably prefer that, yeah? Yeah. Let's start with the thumbsticks. Using a stick for WASD is hardly a new idea and has some very real-world benefits, especially when it comes to comfort. But there are situations, particularly for PC gaming, where the keyboard is still king. The problem with a thumbstick like this is twofold. You can't press multiple opposite directions at once, and it's not as easy to hit the exact direction you need. This first problem is basically why Plouffe couldn't play Valorant or Counter-Strike or any competitive shooter with.
That is so BS. That is so BS to say, because just because you can't press A and D at the same time doesn't mean you can't play Valorant or CS. You do need to counter strafe, but there's 2 ways. You don't need to counter strafe. And I guarantee you he's probably not that good at the game where counter strafing was maybe at CS, but he's probably not that good at the game where counter strafing or not counter strafing is like really affecting his game, right? Like, I'm not some high ranked Valorant player. I'm bronze 3, right? But I can counter strafe on the Azeron on joystick, but I counter strafe a different way. Now, I did run into this problem because I used to use A and D to counter strafe, but there's 2 different types of counter strafing. There's counter strafing where, let's say you peek a corner, you walk to the right to peek a corner, and then you hit the opposite direction. You hit left while you're still holding right because you're pressing A and D at the same time to stop dead in your tracks and take a shot, right? So you need that in CS, I hear, because in CS there's a period of time where you're sliding over, and then when you release the button, you're still moving, so you have to wait. But if you're sliding over and then you press the opposite direction at the same time, and you're pressing both of them at the same time, you stop dead in your tracks, right? In Valorant, you don't really have to do that. If you release the button, you're stopping just as fast as if you were to press the opposite direction, right? So you don't need to do that in Valorant. You don't need to press A and D at the same time. You just need to release the joystick. That's it, right? And then the other actually powerful version of counter strafing in Valorant is when you move to one direction and then you move back in the other direction immediately, and in between the time when you're changing direction, there is a small, like maybe 4-frame window where you're accurate. So when you go left, you go right, and then you change direction to left, then there's a small window in there where you're accurate, and that's where you want to fire. So you have to time your moving back and forth with your shots so that you're shooting in those small windows of accuracy while you're moving back and forth, right? That's the powerful version of counter strafing in Valorant that you have to practice. And you can do that on Azeron on a joystick because I do it. I do it, and I do it properly, and I have videos of me doing it. So, yeah.
This thing. Want to get into a strafe battle? I mean, you can, but good luck. Want to stop on a dime by inputting the opposite direction while holding your current direction? Not happening. Ploof managed.
You can also do that if you want to. Why? Because you can set all of the buttons, 2 buttons on your Azeron. Now, if you want to do AD at the same time to stop your movement, you can just set A and D on 2 of the buttons on your Azeron for Valorant, so that when you're moving to the right, then you can just press A and D at the same time. You just tap them, right? Now, there's a bunch of different ways you can do that in with this game, right? You press A and D at the same, you holding right? You press A and D at the same time, you tap it. Like, you don't hold it, you tap it. You don't hold it because it will take control of the fact that you were holding right, and it will negate the right, and then you will start moving the other direction or some shit like that if you release the joystick. It's weird, but like it's a bunch of different ways you can do it because of the implications of you pressing 2 buttons and then releasing the joystick, right? Like, it's different. But if you want to do that, you can hold right, tap both the buttons, and keep holding the joystick, and you will stop. And you let go of the joystick, and you will stop. So you hold right, you tap both the buttons, you take your shot, right? You hold left, you tap A and D on your what's name, and then you take the shot. You could do that. You could set that up on the Azeron, but they didn't take enough time to do that. But this dude had this thing for 2 months. He had it for 2 months and couldn't come up with solutions to his problems in the games while having this and using it for 2 months. It's frustrating.
The Cyborg is a dream come true. I mean, 29 programmable buttons, a profile for every game. Mwah! But that's also its biggest problem. Sometimes your main profile, right, the one that's just on there by default, is gonna work perfectly with a new game right out of the box. But because of the non-standardization of controls on PC, a lot of the time, it won't.
So why is that any different than a keyboard? Why is that problem any different than a keyboard problem, right? If the non-standardization of PC controls is the problem, using a keyboard, you still have to move your controls in the game on the keyboard. So if you have a default profile, right, that you use for all of your games, right? Let's say you have a default profile that you use for all of your games, and you change all of your games buttons to match your Azeron. Or you have a default profile and some of the keys don't line up with the new game that you downloaded, but most of them do because it's your default profile the same way how sprinting is on shift, crouch is usually on control, but some games your crouch is not on control, right? So if you're used to using control crouch, you have to go into the settings in the game and change it from C to control. Or if you're used to using C for crouch and it's on control, you have to go move that button. That's the same problem you have on a keyboard. That's not an Azeron problem. That's the controls being not standard in games. That's not an Azeron problem.
Dying Light 2, for example. Z is your hang glider, H is heal, M is map, and C is crouch. So wait, now the control key that you had mapped for crouch in CS.
The control key that you had mapped for crouch in CSGO on your keyboard doesn't work in Dying Light because in Dying Light, it's C. So guess what you have to do? You have to move the button so it's more comfortable for you to play, so you don't have to think, oh man, I gotta use this. You literally will go into the software, right, of your default profile that you were using for CS, right? And then you hit add profile. It copies the profile that you're on and it gives it a default name, so like profile 2, and then you go to the button, to the crouch button, you click on it, and then you change it to control. Now you have the same layout, right, that you had for CS, and the only button that you needed to change was the crouch button. You click on the crouch button and you change it to control, and you go back in the game. You're good.
Go doesn't work in this game, and bloody hell, where did you map Z again? If you're the kind of—
Where did you map Z again? You don't think about the buttons on the Azeron as labeled buttons. You're not matching to labeled buttons, right? Even if you are matching to labeled buttons because you have the labels in the software, right? You don't look at the Azeron to find out where your button is. You look at the software to find out where the button is. So it's like, where did I map Z again? Yeah. If you didn't remember where you put Z, what is normally your Z button set to? Do you normally have your Z button set to ping? Is ping the same button that you use for it? Like if I had my Z button set to ping, right? Because I put my Z button on my mouse for ping, then in every game, I'm changing my ping in the settings of the game to Z, so I don't have to go into the software for Logitech to change it. Because it's easier for me to change it within the game rather than opening up the software. So you can have a default Azeron profile and just change your buttons in the game to match your Azeron, if that's what you want to do. I didn't do it that way. I change all of my stuff. I have a whole set for every single game that I be playing. I have an Azeron profile for it.
A gamer, you know who you are, who plays that game, just that one game. This might not be a problem for you, but if variety is the spice of your life—
Variety is the spice of my life. And I play a lot of different games, and it takes me like 5 seconds, not 5 seconds. It takes me like 10 minutes or less to set up a new profile, because I'm usually setting up a profile based on another profile that I already have. Usually I'm not setting up a brand new profile. Some games I do set up a brand new profile, but guess the first buttons that I set? Jump, crouch, sprint, and reload. Because they're always going to be in the same spot if I'm playing a new shooter. Every time.
life, the Cyborg may feel a little bit like the next day on the toilet. I mean, to be clear, Azeron's software was pretty intuitive and bug-free. It supports an unlimited number of profiles and can store 2 of them on board for gaming events and the like. But this sky's the limit flexibility can also take the joy out of just sitting down to game for a bit.
No, it will not take the joy out of sitting down and gaming for a bit. If you understand the different things you can do with it, you can literally have a default profile that works with most games. And then once you find out where the buttons actually are for the game that you're playing that's new, you're going to move them just like you do for keyboard. I'm sure that most people don't play default keyboard settings on every single game if a new game comes out. A new game comes out, you download it, you play the game, and you're like, you know what? I want to move this other button over here. I want to move this other button because this button being all the way over here I don't like where it is. I want to move it, right? So you're gonna take a little bit of time to get acquainted with the buttons in a new game, and then you're gonna move the buttons around, especially on PC. You're probably gonna move the buttons around to something that's better for you. That's the same thing you're gonna do with the Azeron, except the Azeron is a little different because it's not standard keyboard buttons. But if you're playing with it and you have a standard setup, then you can copy the setup and then move some buttons around and reconfigure your buttons so that you can, so it's more comfortable. But it's not the pain in the ass that he's making it seem like. And if you're somebody that was thinking about getting an Azeron and you're like, no, yeah, I think it would be cool to use it, and I know that it's going to take a little bit to get used to. It's not going to take you 2 weeks. It's not going to take you a month. It's going to take you a couple of days, but you have to have your default buttons down. If in every single game on a keyboard, the jump button, your sprint button, and your interact button was different, and you never changed it, yeah, it's going to be daunting learning new games because you're going to be used to using spacebar as jump, used to using shift as run, used to using control as crouch. But then in like the next 3 games you download or whatever, those buttons are completely in a different spot. And you're like, this is weird. I'm not used to playing like this. So you're going to move those buttons to where you normally are used to having them. So that's why if you have a default setting on your Azeron, you can play with that. You can sit down, just play the game with your default loadout on your Azeron until you find that something is out of place and you're like, okay, I want to move this. This happens on keyboard. This happens on controller. Not as much on controller because, not a lot of people move things around on controller, but when I play a shooter on controller for whatever reason, because I don't like playing shooters on controller anymore, I keep saying this over and over again, but for the time where I have to play a shooter on controller, I move my jump button to R1 or L1 because I like to be able to jump without taking my hand off the sticks. Like that is the same thing. Like if every game the jump button is X, I don't want my jump on X on any button on any game when I'm playing playing a game on console. I don't want my jump on A. I don't want my jump on X if I'm playing a shooter. I want it on the bumpers or R1 R2 or R1 L1.
When each and every game you play requires going through this process where you launch it, check the default key bindings, tab out of the game, double check your Azeron profile bindings, cross-reference the two, accounting for any new functions that this game might have that the last one didn't, then go back into the game, test drive it a bit, tune it, and then finally begin the process of committing that profile to your muscle memory. And the worst part is that while this does get easier over time, he put in literally dozens of hours on this thing.
He didn't obviously put in enough hours. He didn't put in enough meaningful hours on the device. You told him to take it home. He used it for 2 months and still couldn't figure out simple problems. Simple problems. You guys are a tech giant on YouTube. Y'all have 14.9 million subscribers because people trust what you say about the tech that you review. And you gave an unfair review of the Azeron.
I'm giving you credit for it, because you really took one for the team there. Even for the games you play regularly, there's always going to be a small learning curve when you take a break.
No, there's not. No, there's not. No. How can you say these things when you haven't tried it yourself? And if you have tried it yourself, why not say that you tried it yourself? Because you said that you paid someone else to do it. So I'm working off the assumption that you said that you wanted to try it, and then you didn't try it, and you had somebody else do it. You might have tried it for like, I don't know, a couple minutes, maybe played with it for like an hour, and it was like, yeah, I need somebody else to do this. You play with it for a little bit. I need somebody else to do this because I got a lot of work to do, and I can't really sit here and try to learn this new device, right? I get it. But you can't sit here and say these things when you haven't had an extensive um experience with it. Whereas the other guy didn't even want to do it in the first place. He had 2 months with it, and he's having issues that I had within my first 2 months of using it, and solved and got past and not even thinking about. If you give this to somebody who didn't want to use it in the first place and pay them to review it, then yeah, they might take the money. Or if you're just giving it to him because you're like, oh, you know, can you take this home and do it? Or he was told to do it because that's his job. But if he's a writer and he was like, oh, just take this home and do this, maybe he's not the person to really like test this thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Maybe your friends went on vacation and you haven't touched Dying Light 2 for a few weeks. Prompt comes up and it's labeled as a key that you mapped it to. Can you remember where Q is on the...
you don't need to remember where Q is. You just need to remember where you put your interaction key. If the prompt is your interact key and it's Q, you probably use interact Q in every game. If you don't and you use interact Q in one game, you use interact E in another game, you use interact F in another game, you use interact X in another game for whatever reason, like if you use different interact buttons in every game you play, then yeah, it'll come up on the screen, you'll be able to see it, you'll be able to cross-reference it by looking down at your keyboard. But that's not how Azeron works. It doesn't have labeled keys. So what you do is you remember where you put the function. On my what I use for my interact keys and my secondary interact keys, my one interact key is now on my mouse all the time. Any game where I have to pick up a lot of stuff off the ground, I use my interact key is on my mouse all the time now. That's where I put it. Most comfortable for me on that. I could put it on my Azeron, but I'd rather not have it on my Azeron. I can put a different key there. But that's up to me. If somebody else wants it on their Azeron, they can put it on their Azeron. In Valorant, it's not, my pickup button is not on my mouse because I don't need it to be there, right? I don't even look down to pick up guns anymore. So when I want to pick up when I want to pick up a rifle off the ground, I have a drop button. I hit back on my D-pad nub and I drop the gun that I'm carrying. And I just walk over the other gun. I stand on top of the gun that I want to pick up and I drop the other gun that I'm carrying with back on the nub. That's the only game where I don't have escape set to the nub, the back on the nub, right? But I know this because I have the muscle memory to remember that. But every single other game, my muscle memory is escape is on back on the nub. But I know that drop is my keybind for Valorant right there. You just have to play with it enough to know. Like
The
it's not that
cyborg
difficult.
in this profile? Maybe, but more likely, you're gonna end up leaving the software with the profile map up on a second screen so that you can reference it.
No,
which
you don't.
is
You don't
pretty
need to do
immersion
that.
breaking
You
compared
don't
to
need
how
to do
naturally
that.
I suspect most of us would use a keyboard or a controller. There are some shortcuts to this. Profiles, for example, can be imported or exported, and the surprisingly vibrant community around the cyborg has created profiles for many of the most popular.
I would not use other people's profiles. I wouldn't do that. Like, I don't think it's great to download a bunch of other people's profiles because you're not going to be able to remember it as fast as if you were to make your own profile. If you make your own profile and you put the keys where you want them, you'll remember them a lot faster than if you just download somebody else's profile. Because everybody's profiles are going to be different. Everybody has a different thought process of where they want their buttons to be. Now, if you want to start out with a solid like idea of having some buttons, if you want to use my defaults, I would say put your jump crouch and you put your jump crouch and sprint and reload where I have them, and then you put everything else where you feel comfortable. So at least you'll be able to start out with something that's the same, right? You'll be able to be like, okay, these are where these buttons are going to be forever for shooters. Every shooter I play, these buttons will be in that same spot forever. And everything else you put where you want it. So at least you'll have some start to where you want your buttons to be so that you can memorize them faster. And then when you're playing, you'll start to know what you need more often and what you need to remember first. And then you'll start to get used to pressing those buttons and pressing the different buttons that you need to press in different situations. It just takes playing the games. You already know how to play your games. You just have to get used to the buttons being in a different spot. That's all. You're not learning. I wouldn't learn a brand new game that you never played before and then also try to learn the Azeron on top of that. Play a game that you already know how to play and then use the Azeron on that. So the only thing you're learning is where the buttons are. And then you already know how to use the buttons. You already know how to use the skills. You know how to use everything else. You're just learning the Azeron.
Popular games. But as with the Steam controller, this isn't the silver bullet that you might hope it would be either. And Dota 2 presented us with a fresh problem. Plouffe ended up having to make custom profiles, not just for the game, but also for different heroes, depending on the usual items he bought and their number of abilities. To be clear, once it was all set up and working, he actually loved having everything at his fingertips like this. But the ability to just, on a whim, click on a different hero and say, yes, I'm gonna play as.
So if you're playing something like that, I don't know what the button setup for that game is, but usually, right? So this is another thing that's not a cyborg or not an Azeron problem. It's the characters. So if you're playing that same game with a keyboard, right? You don't have to move your keys. Why would you have to move your keys on the Azeron? If you're setting QWER or whatever, right, to the flat buttons on the Azeron, why would you have to move them if you change your character if you don't have to move them when you change your character while playing on a keyboard? They're still going to be, the buttons are still in the same spot. It's if you want to change them. That's like saying that when I play Overwatch, right? Because you know how you can set things for different characters in Overwatch. I don't change anything for anybody except for Ashe recently with changing the ADS compensation or whatever to something different. That's the only thing I've ever changed for a single character. Everything else, I don't change anything for any of the characters that I play. All of them are the same buttons. I don't have to move my buttons based on what character I'm playing. They're all in the same spot because I wouldn't move them I wouldn't move any of my keys on the keyboard. So like it's up to you if you want to switch up what your characters or how your buttons are set to your characters. But yes, you can set up a default thing for the game that you're playing, even if it has a bunch of different characters with different ability sets, and still use them. You don't have to change your button configuration on your keyboard every single time you switch a character in League of Legends. You can if you want to, based on who you play, if that's more comfortable for you, but you don't have to do that. I guarantee there are plenty of people that don't do that. That's not an Azeron problem.
You this match was kind of gone. You can pay for ReWASD, which will apparently detect the game that you launch.
You also don't have to do this
And swap profiles for you automatically.
You don't need ReWASD to do that. You don't need anything to swap profiles for you automatically. You literally, it's like, oh, I'm getting ready to play Overwatch 2. I double click Overwatch 2. That's it. Would it be nice for it to would it be nice for the software to auto switch to whichever game you're playing? Yeah, it would be. If they implemented that, I think that would be a great idea. But I don't think that you need to do that. I do this every day. I have the Azeron thing open and it's pinned to the bottom of my start bar. It's pinned on my start bar. It's always open. I open it. It's like, oh, what game I'm about to play? I think I'm getting ready to play Super People. Double click on Super People. That's it.
It's a nice little quality of life thing, but it's gonna cost you another $25 for that functionality at the time of writing,
buy
and
rewise
it doesn't
for that.
solve
That's not
the
what it's for.
every hero needs a different binding problem. Only the
Every hero
I
doesn't
play a
need
lot
a
of
different
different games one. But hey, at least it's comfortable, right? Well, about that. We found that over long periods of time, it was a bit of a mixed bag. The shape is actually quite pleasant after adjusting it, and you can get the palm.
So comfortability, comfort. Comfort. Let's talk about comfort. So the problem that I have with the Azeron with comfort, right, is it moving on my desk. It has like rubber feet or whatever on the bottoms of here, right? It has rubber feet, but that's just sometimes it's just not enough to keep it in one spot, right? So what I did was I put Velcro on the bottom of here. I did a really bad job of it. I've been meaning to get some Velcro and actually like reapply the Velcro to my desk right here, because that's how much I use this thing. I have Velcro stuck to my desk right here so that I can sit this on here so it has some type of friction so it doesn't move. But since I didn't set the Velcro up right, and I need to reapply the Velcro and actually get some Velcro so that I can do this properly, I usually like to have my Azeron set so that my wrist is straight, right? So I have my arm on the armrest, and then I want my wrist to be straight while I'm using the Azeron, because if you have it straight on the desk, pointing toward the screen, and you're doing this, your wrist is like, let's see if I can move this up. Let me move this up real quick. Right? So if you have your thing pointed toward the screen, and your wrist is like rotated, this does get to be a problem, right? This does get to be you know, it bothers me after a while. I don't like to have my wrist rotated like this. So the way I have my Azeron sitting on my desk most of the time is I have it pointed this way to a direction so that it's lined up with my arm, so that when I put my hand down on it, my wrist is straight. I want my wrist to be straight while I'm using the Azeron. So that's how I have it sitting on my desk, so that it's my wrist is straight and there's no like strain on my wrist, because my wrist is doing this the whole fucking time. Like when you're on a keyboard, this is the reason why people turn their keyboard sometimes. And even when I play, I don't turn my keyboard as much as some other players do, and play like this, right? Like to have my arm sideways on my desk, but I turn it a little bit so that I can have my wrist be straight while I'm playing the game, right? Like you want your wrist to be straight. You don't want to cock your wrist to the side. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's why this is how I have it. And sometimes when you're playing the game, if the feet are not like enough friction on your desk, because the top of this desk is kind of like it's carbon fiber, or it's maybe fake carbon fiber, I don't know, but it doesn't grip. It's not grippy for the rubber feet, right? So that's why I have Velcro on the bottom. Some people may not have that issue. Maybe some people have a glass top. Maybe some people have something else that's a little more grippy. Maybe some people have like or what I was thinking about doing is getting one of those grippy, like a grippy mat, and putting it underneath so that the mat can grip on the feet and the feet grip onto the mat, whatever. And then that way it won't move, right, at all. But if it doesn't move when your wrist is straight, great, right? But sometimes you might be in a heated fight or whatever, and then sometimes like it starts to rotate while you're moving because you're pressing the joystick forward, and it gets to be like this, and then that's why I usually will adjust it back. But that's why I want to get some more Velcro and put it on my desk so that I can sit it Velcro to my desk and have it sitting in this so my wrist can be straight. And then when I'm not using it, I can Velcro it, take the Velcro off, sit it over here or whatever. If I'm like eating dinner, sitting at the computer or whatever, like that's the thing about comfort for me.
In a couple of different styles, with the curved one being right, I'd say for both of us. The Omron D2F01 switches are not too hard to press and have a nice clicky sound. And while you can fumble during some more intense sessions, overall it does feel kind of right to just rest your hand in this other hand. However, something about the plastic material used for the switches, particularly the bottom ones that your fingers rest in, feels distinctly greasy after as little as 20 or 30 minutes. And honestly, when Plouf told me this, I thought he might just be being a whiny pants about it. Like,
so if you're sweating, if you're literally sweating, that could be why. But also, you don't have to rest your fingers on there. As you start to use the Azeron more, your grip is going to be a lot looser. Like, you can have your grip be a lot looser on the keys. When I first started using the Azeron, my fingers would not sit in here comfortably because I didn't understand, like my brain didn't understand where my fingers were supposed to rest, right? Or how they were supposed to sit in here without pressing buttons by accident, right? But as I played with it more, I got more comfortable with having my fingers sitting in here in this like space, right? So then I don't really rest my fingertips against those buttons. The orange buttons that he's talking about, I don't really rest my fingertips against those buttons. My fingers usually kind of lightly rest on the first row of buttons that you can pull. I usually sit in there, and then like my wrist is what is like, it's like resting like on the wrist rest, and my fingers are like lightly sitting on those buttons. So like I don't even have to worry about my fingers sweating and sitting on those plastics, but I also bought the little pads or whatever that come with the that they don't come with it, but you buy the little pads separately, but they cut them out for you so you can stick them to the keys. I didn't stick them on all the keys. I only stuck them on the keys where you pull, the flat buttons that he was talking about, and the buttons right behind the second row of pull keys. So there's one row of pull keys and the second row of pull keys, and then like the flats on the bottom that he's talking about. So like the other buttons, I don't have them on there, partially because they're kind of a pain in the ass to put on. So like, and I don't really need them because I just hit them with my fingernails, like the kicks that I call them, not the scorpion tails, but the ones right on below the scorpion tails. I call those the kicks.
seriously, dude, tired from holding down W for too long? But for this one, after a few minutes, I can actually kind of see what he means. The forum on Azeron's website has a guide about using lizard skin on the switches, and then you can buy grip tape for the palm rest from Azeron directly. So it's not like these problems aren't solvable, but it's just yet another thing to faff about.
But you only have to do it once. You only have to do it once. I do want to get that lizard skin for the palm rest though. It looks good. I want that. But it's an enthusiast, like that's another thing. That's the word. It's an enthusiast product. It's a niche enthusiast product. People that buy stuff like this are willing to buy extra things for it, right? Usually. Like I'm like the lizard skin thing to put on there, like it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I think I might want to get that to put on here to make it a little more comfortable, right? Because you don't have to get that. You can, you don't have to. But I think it's, I got the grip tape for the switches. I think that's a good thing. But it's like, I got to spend extra money. You've already spent $170 on this keypad specifically for gaming. But that you can also use for photo editing and video editing and anything else that has a lot of hotkeys. You don't have to just use it for gaming.
With and pay more money for to have a non-slippery experience. And remember that all of this cost is on top of whatever mouse and keyboard you already have.
No, it's not. It does not have anything to do with the cost of your mouse and keyboard that you already have, because you're not getting it to replace your keyboard with it. So if this keyboard probably cost me $120. Maybe $130 or $140. I don't remember. Because no, it wasn't even that. Probably like $120, $130. Because like I had to buy the keys. Like I bought the pudding keycaps or whatever. Those were HyperX pudding keycaps. And then I bought like these 4 Demon Slayer keycaps or whatever. Just specifically for the number keys up here. And then I bought a space bar. Like I bought the Demon Slayer space bar. And the space bar was like $10 or $15, right? And so like the keyboard itself was like $100 at the time. So yes, the keyboard cost me about $100 something, but I'm not like, my keyboard costs $100. I don't know if I want to spend $100 on the Azeron or $170 on the Azeron. It doesn't have anything to do with my keyboard. This still does not replace your keyboard as a whole. I can't just throw my keyboard out. I can't just throw my keyboard out and be like, oh, I'm only using the Azeron. I use the Azeron for games and video editing and soon photo editing or Photoshop, right? I don't use it to surf the internet. I don't use it to type. Like, I still need a keyboard to type. Like, maybe if you're getting the Azeron and you're building a PC and you want to only use something for game, you're only going to use the Azeron for gaming, you can get a cheap crusty keyboard that you don't care about because you know you're not going to be using it for gaming, and then use the Azeron for gaming. You could do that. That could be what you do. And then you'll save some money on your keyboard. But if you already had your keyboard and you paid $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 for your keyboard because it's some, really nice 60% keyboard that you had customized specifically for you, that doesn't mean that, oh, damn, I'm going to get the Azeron and I just paid this money for this keyboard. Nah, because you still like the keyboard. The keyboard still has an aesthetic. The keyboard still serves a purpose on your desk. And the Azeron serves a different purpose on your desk. Like, what? It has nothing to do with your keyboard and your mouse.
Because this is not a full replacement for either of them, so you can't exactly just sell them.
It's not even a replacement for your mouse. Like, why is that even part of the conversation? It's not a full replacement for either your keyboard or your mouse. It's not a replacement for your mouse at all. Like, not even in the slightest, not even a little bit.
To recoup some cost unless you plan to just use the default name for every character in every game from now on. I mean, I suppose it would be an option to get 2 of them for a total of 58 programmable keys plus additional.
Which somebody could do if they wanted to, but is that going way out of your way to get rid of your keyboard, to use 2 Azerons to now learn how to type on them and fully replace your keyboard? Yeah, that is going way out of your way, but if you wanted to do that, you could. You could even, if you wanted to go super far out of your way, label the actual keys and keep the actual keys the same exact way on your Azeron on one profile. So now it's more like a keyboard where Q is always going to be Q on your Azeron. And then you switch all the stuff in your game to your Azeron. You could do that if you want to, but you don't have to.
Layers and type on them. But unless you're used to similar systems like the DataHand Personal, I would strongly recommend against it. I think the more obvious benefit of that right-hand version is that it could be great for Southpaw gamers who are notoriously underserved by existing keyboard options. And even if you're not a Southpaw gamer,
True.
It could be great for you. I don't want this to come across harsh or overly critical, especially.
I think it's not harsh. I think it's not overly critical. I think it's underinformed. Like, you're very underinformed about a lot of things about the Cyborg. Like, almost every single thing that you said was a problem with the Azeron Cyborg was very easily fixable if you were to take some time and do it. I think maybe we missed out. I might have skipped something by accident, but I don't remember talking about the joystick accuracy, because he was talking about the joystick accuracy where sometimes you would miss when you would hit down on the joystick, or you wanted to hit D on the joystick for right. You want to hit right on the joystick, and you would hit up sometimes, where you would get like right up, or you would get right down because like it's not accurate. That's because if whatever way your thumb is pressing down to get right, you have to adjust in the settings, or adjust in the software, or physically adjust the joystick, right? So that when you press right, what feels like right to you will be naturally right. Like, if you've pressed left and you get up, then you need to rotate in the software the joystick, or rotate physically the joystick, so that when you press left, you get left. You don't have to try to figure out where left is, you can just put left where your finger wants left to be. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it can always be that all the time. Because every time you make a new profile, you make it from a profile that already exists. So all you're doing is editing the profile to change it around for the new game, and you don't have to recalibrate the joystick and recalibrate like how everything is set up. The D-pad, he was saying about the D-pad nub, how the D-pad is not really good for, really moving around, and he couldn't really reach it with his baby hands. You can move the joystick, you can rotate the joystick physically so that the D-pad, and you can tilt it so that the D-pad nub is in a place where you'll easily be able to reach it with no problem and no discomfort. And then in the software, you can rotate the analog joystick so that it compensates for how you rotated the joystick physically. How you physically rotated the joystick module, you can compensate in the software and rotate the joystick so that it will give you the directions that you are expecting to get when you press a direction with your thumb.
Because the product does do what it says on the tin, and they certainly have a lot of happy customers. It's just that it is our job to make sure that you're up to speed on the potential downside.
When you say that it's your job to make sure that people are up to speed on the potential downsides, you didn't give them any solutions to the downsides. And I think that's fair to ask for, seeing as the person that was using this used it for 2 whole months. There's no way that you can have something for 2 whole months and not be able to find a solution to the problems that you're having. Especially when in the first 2 months of me using the Azeron, I solved all these problems. All the problems that he's talking about, I was able to solve them. And if I didn't have those problems, I solve them now. The thing is so customizable that you can solve all of your problems. He talked about dead zones too. I may have skipped over the dead zones part, but you can change the dead zones for the Azeron, right? You could change the outer and inner dead zones for the Azeron. So if you want no dead zone, you can have no dead zone. So when you move it a tiny bit, it's very, very sensitive. You can change the dead zone. So say for instance, you feel like you're getting a little stick drift, because I don't know if this stick is as good as something that is in a PS5 controller or Xbox controller, even though those will get stick drift at some point too, right? I don't know what they are. So if you feel like you're getting a little stick drift, or you're seeing that your thing is getting stick drift, you can adjust the dead zones to counteract the stick drift in the software.
It's before you commit the desk space, money, and I'd say most importantly, time that it takes to adopt a peripheral like this into your gaming routine.
He's people that look to you to get something like this, right? People that look to you to get something like this, to be like, okay, you hear all these downsides and these bad things about it, and it's like, damn, yo, I don't know if I should get that. And a lot of people don't do their own research, right? They might watch this video, and then that's the only video they might watch. But then they might watch some other videos, and there are other people, right, that I think that are a little overly positive about the Azeron, that don't talk about any of the negatives, right? That could also give you a very heavy bias in one direction. But I like the thing, but I think it has faults, right? I think it has faults. I don't think it's for everyone. I don't think everyone should pick one up right away today. I don't. But I think giving the product a fair review is important, especially when it's such a niche product and the company is not that big. You got this video that has over 1 million plus views in 2 days, and 1 million plus views in 2 days on a channel that has 14 million subscribers, and you gave it a very lazy review, which could harm any sales that the company would have had, right? And it's not that the thing is bad, but like you didn't give anybody any type of reassurance about like the thing being a good product. Any type of reassurance. Like if anything, if I was watching this and I wanted to get Azeron, I'd have been like, damn, I don't know if I want to get one now. I would have still looked up other stuff, but like I'd have been like, dang, I don't know, man. Because like I watch Linus all the time for other stuff too. But it's like seeing this review on a product that I use every day and had to get used to using, and then him telling people that, dang, it's going to take you a long time to get used to this. It's going to take you a long time. It's going to take you a long time to get it adjusted to your hand. It's going to take you like 30 minutes. Yes, it might take you a long time to adjust the thing to get it set to your hand properly and to be so where it's comfortable, but you only got to do it once. Maybe you might go in and readjust it a few other times and like tweak it a little bit to make it just that much more comfortable for you to get it to be exactly where your fingers lay. But once you get it tuned, that's it. Like you don't have to set it no more, right? There are some things about it being 3D printed that are bad, like the joints where the fingers rotate. Sometimes it seems like they would not stay in one spot. So I legit super glued them Jones. Like I got them to where I knew I like to have them where I wanted them to be, and I legit just super glued them so they don't ever fucking move. Excuse my language. But I super glued them so they never move. And now they're there. And I don't have any problem with that because they're set for me. Like this is set for me. I'm not selling this to nobody. I didn't want to give it to nobody. I never thought about, dang man, I'm just gonna go back to keyboard. I was already into it. I got it set how I want it, and I just super glued the joints. I super glued them so they don't move. So they don't rotate when I press down hard on them. That was the one thing I was having an issue. It was like sometimes I would press down after using it for a really long time. I would press down and they would rotate down. I would have to pull the joint back up because like I don't know, maybe like it's wearing, like because it's 3D printed. So you know, and they try to make the joints. They put like little clicky things in there to make it a little harder for it to move, and then you tighten the things down, but it still kind of like moves a little bit. So I made sure that they don't ever move. I just super glued them. So I still think there are some faults to the device, but like if you're somebody who's into stuff like this and having very customizable thing, then you're probably gonna have, and you're like an early adopter type of person, and you like tinkering with stuff and tinkering with settings and games and all that kind of stuff. This will be something that is like for you. Clearly, it's not for someone who didn't want to use it in the first place, who didn't want to take the time to solve the problems that they were having because they didn't really care about getting good with it. Like, I don't know, man. Like it just seems like this is not they talk about how they gave it a fair shake. I really don't feel like they gave it a fair shake. It's just actually not. It's actually not fair. Like it's not a fair shake. But
to adopt our sponsor,
War Thunder. War Thunder is a free-to-play online military vehicle combat game.
Stop. Anyway, that's been this video. This video is how long? This video is 1 hour and 23 minutes long. I'm just gonna upload this uncut. Hopefully somebody finds some use in this video. But if you did, thanks for watching. It's a long one. I don't know. This video might get 4 views, but I wanted to talk about it, so I thought it was important to put it out there. So yeah. So peace.